We have a winter storm underway from Kansas to Virginia, all sorts of warnings up. And we're going to take a specific look at Kansas City and a few other places to see what's actually fallen so far. We're also going to talk about what impact, if any, is this going to have in places further north, like to us in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England? And the answer is not much unless you're in the southern half of that range. But we'll discuss all of this, and we're going to be talking about the week ahead and maybe even another storm system that might be coming for next weekend. So let's move forward here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which you can easily support if you do shop on Amazon. Use our referral link that's pinned to the top of the chat board. Or if it's you can't access that, you can find it on the descriptor to this podcast. Just click on the link, go do your shopping, and Amazon throws us back a little bit of coin for sending you there and doesn't cost you a dime, not a dime out of your pocket. So we appreciate your support if you shop Amazon by using the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast referral link. This storm system is really going to town in a lot of places, Joe, particularly in northeast Kansas and northwest Missouri, where we've got a lot of areas with almost a foot on the ground so far and counting, because they're, as Miss Fallerite, who is on the chat board and is from near Kansas City, is saying she's got almost 11 inches on the ground where she is, and snowing to beat the band. I mean, the weather is just awful all across, all through the I-70 corridor, which runs east to west, right through almost all of those warnings. It's just not a good day.
Yeah, it's probably one of the worst snowstorms for most areas in at least several years. And I saw on the local national news tonight for some, it's been the worst winter storm in over 10 years. So for all of those people who thought that climate change and global warming was going to preclude them ever seeing a major winter storm, guess what? Here it is, and the aftermath. It's not going to get very warm at all. In fact, if anything, it's going to stay very cold. And in fact, I should point out that the overall pattern for this week it can be best summed up in one word: blustery, because those winds are not going to really let up at all through the course of this week. It doesn't look, though, Joe, that we're going to have much to talk about, at least through Friday. Just sunshine, some passing clouds Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, unseasonably cold, again, blustery winds, and then we fasten our seatbelts for the next potential weather headache, which may come on Saturday. Although, as predicted yesterday, yesterday's GFS was making really a lot out of this storm on Saturday, almost making it like one of the storms of the century, but it is considerably tampered down that threat for next
Well,
week.
you didn't. I guess you didn't look at the 18Z Europe map, 18Z, both the GFS and the European. Look, this is all about the. I said this last night. I'm going to say this again. It is all everything that's going on weather-wise now and all this coming week and next weekend is all about the strength of the block. If the block relaxes enough, then you could certainly get a storm system that's going to try to come up the East Coast. If it's too strong, then you're going to wind up with something that's going to try to come up and then turn out to the east again. And of course, if the block winds up being really pulling out in 2 weeks, then you could have a storm system move up the coast and it would be a coast hugger. But this is the battle we're going to be fighting for the next, I would say, probably 3 days. One of the interesting things, though, forget the operational, is the fact that the ensembles this afternoon that were out actually lend support to what the 18Z run did, and I think we're still going to see back and forth here. Also, I just don't want I don't want to certainly not leave this out, but regardless of whatever happens on the East Coast next weekend, late this week, the seedling low that's going to eventually wind up somewhere in the southeast has the potential to produce maybe not quite like this, obviously, but for the parts of the deep south, there could be a significant icing event, snow and icing event from Texas all the way to South Carolina and western North Carolina. So I think that's going to be also front and center before anything gets up to the East Coast next weekend,
Well, we're
especially
going to
since it
see.
especially since it impacts me.
Well, you have been sitting pretty. Up here we have had our heat waves, our spells of cold weather, our snowstorm, and meanwhile you're sitting down there, 2,200 feet up in northern Georgia, saying, "Well, I didn't see any of that, and that's not so bad down here." So maybe it's time, Joe. Maybe it's
And
time
maybe it
for
is.
a
Maybe it
little
is.
retribution.
All right, welcome tonight to everybody on the chat board, and those of you watching in the background. Welcome to tonight's um, Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're here. This is our Sunday night show. We're here usually Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. with Friday and Saturday off, but we just did shows on Friday and Saturday because of this storm. And who knows? We might be on again Friday and Saturday this coming week. So we may not have a day off here for a while, Ruben Fairchild. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn the notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you like the show, hit the like button, as 72 people, Joe, have already done so. Here's Can. I found I'm bringing this up. This is the one thing I don't know is because I was trying to figure this out. Okay, now I was just trying to see some of the numbers that were showing up here in the Kansas City area in terms of the time that these observations were taken. But as of 5:58 p.m., 1 mile south of McLouth, Kansas, Miss Fowlerite on the chat board may be familiar with many of these places. 15 on the ground there. Platte City, Missouri, 12. Weatherby Lake, Missouri, 12. 2 miles north of Lawrence, Kansas, 11 and a half. Lansing, Kansas, 11. 1 mile northwest of Lawrence, Kansas, 11. And I'm looking here in the downtown area of Kansas City, and it's mostly, I would say, probably between 6 and 9 inches. There's some 10-inch amounts to the southwest of the center of the city, 10 and a half. So this has been definitely a producer of some decent snows. I'm going to just widen this map out a little bit so we could take a look at a few other places. How about St. Louis? So far
How
in and
about
around,
St. Louis?
yes, Delhi, Illinois, 8.5. 1 mile west of St. Peters, Missouri, 7.9. 1 mile east of St. Peters, Missouri, 7. Dorsey, Illinois, 7.5. Winfield, Missouri, 7.5. I'm trying to see if there's actual, something. Am I here? St. Louis. We're looking at one observation here in St. Louis that's got 5 inches, and then as we go further east, let's roll this out. And we'll go into. Remember, these folks are going to be snowing for quite a while yet. In and around Indianapolis, it looks like mostly 4 to 5 inches there. New Ross, Indiana, 4.8. Greencastle, 4.5. Geist Reservoir, 4.5. Eagle Creek Reserve, 4.5. That was fast. 1 mile southeast of Indianapolis International Airport, 4.1. So mostly, I would say, let's say 3 to 4 inches in and around Indianapolis. Let's go a little south. Let's go to Louisville in Kentucky, where we've got mostly between 6 and 8 inches here. Middletown, Kentucky, 6.8. St. Matthews, Kentucky, 6.8. 2 miles southeast of Louisville, 6.8. 3 miles northeast of Louisville International, 6.8. New Middletown, Indiana, 7. Oh, no, I'm sorry, New Middletown. High end is Indiana, 7. I don't know why it's still on this map. 2 miles south-southwest of Highview, Kentucky, 7.5, and Floyd's Knobs. That's
Excuse
that's an
me?
interesting name for a town if there ever was one, Joe.
Yes.
Floyd's Knobs,
Yeah.
7.8, and
From the same
Lexington,
people, from the same people who brought you Succabone Corners in Westchester.
right.
Yeah.
Lexington, Kentucky is at 4. Most of the observations around Lexington, Kentucky are in the 4 to 5 inch range. And they've got a long way to go with this because it's probably going to be snowing there all night. A little further south, going into Tennessee, Bristol, Tennessee has 1.2 inches. Uh, just looking at some places in southwestern Virginia. Danville has half an inch so far. Lynchburg, 2/10. Roanoke, an inch. Blacksburg, between an inch and 2 inches in some places. And then up in Charleston, in West Virginia, it's 2.5 to 3 inches there. Huntington, 3 to 4 inches. So clearly, we're getting, the storm is playing pretty much as advertised.
Right, and it looks like as it comes eastward, it will be spreading that snow into the mid-Atlantic region. Uh, Washington, D.C. tomorrow projected to get about 10 inches of snow. And as I said, tomorrow will be the day when they're going to certify the recent presidential elections. Normally, when you get that much snow, they just shut the city down. But these certifications have to go on or have to happen on the 6th of January. So all the politicians will have to sludge through the snow up to the Capitol to do their duty tomorrow during the course of the day. And of course, 2 weeks from tomorrow is Inauguration Day. We all remember in 1961, well, maybe not all of us, but there are some out there who may remember Inauguration Day in 1961 with John Kennedy. There was a big snowstorm in the Washington, D.C. area, and who knows, maybe there may be more of these to come in the coming days and weeks down in the nation's capital region, Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, all these places that, a lot of these snow lovers have been crying the last 2, 3, 4 years saying, what happened? How come we're not getting any snow? We're like in a snow drought. We're in a hole. Is that, well, I hope you're enjoying this because you're going to get your fair share over the next 24 hours, and who knows, maybe more to come as we go through the course of this winter of 2025.
You know, Joe, if there's one person who probably has enjoyed this snow drought the least, is Governor Murphy of New Jersey because he's had so few weather-related state of emergencies to declare
Yes.
in the past number of winters. He's declared them at other times. But according to Michael Lazara on the chat board, Governor Murphy has declared a state of emergency in New Jersey from Burlington County south. And he poses the question, is it really necessary? That, Michael, is a question that needs to be directed to Trenton, okay? And not to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast.
Now, it used to be if you get a 1 to 3 or 2 to 4 inches, the Weather Service or the Weather Bureau would issue a traveler's advisory, and you say, okay, we'll take it extra easy. There's going to be some snow. There may be some problems on the roadways. Now, of course, you have people like Governor Murphy who, at the drop of a hat or at the drop of a pin, will issue an emergency if there's more than an inch or two of snow on the ground. Look, Governor, all you have to do to avoid what you had, on your hands several years ago when you didn't have any of the townships, bother to sand or salt or treat the roads in advance of the November storm, just have them treat the roads and tell them to go a little more slowly. And that's hardly an emergency, but this is the world we live in today. What can
It
I say?
is. It is. Blizzard warnings are still up for much of central and northeast Kansas and northwest Missouri, and that's going to continue into the early morning hours in most of those counties there. Winter storm warnings across all of Missouri except the extreme south, where we have either winter weather advisories or ice storm warnings. We also have winter weather advisories in northeastern Oklahoma and northern Arkansas, western Kentucky, northwest Tennessee. The ice storm warnings are also up for southern Illinois, a small portion of western Kentucky, and a couple of counties in southwest Indiana. Otherwise, it's winter storm warnings all the way across through Kentucky, all of southeast Ohio, uh, West Virginia, southern Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, just about all of Virginia except the southeast. We have a few counties in North Carolina that border Virginia, which are under winter weather advisories. And we have a mix of winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories for the Western Carolina mountains. Just to my northeast, the last county in the advisory in southwestern North Carolina is not that many miles from where I live. And we also have winter storm warnings for the southern New Jersey counties, advisories just to the north of those. And then there's that very sharp cutoff that we talked about, because once you go north of Route 195, Interstate 195 in New Jersey, which basically runs from Belmar to Trenton, once you go north of there, the snow for tomorrow is going to be very little. And I still covered for a coating to maybe on the southern end of that range, Joe, uh, or an inch. But I think that if you're north of Route 80 or if you're north of Route 287 in Westchester County, you may not see a flake tomorrow out of this.
It's quite true. It's quite possible that that will be the story tomorrow. Anywhere from nothing to maybe at worst a sugar coating, because it's difficult to pin down exactly where the cutoff line is going to be for snow. But it's been so very cold, Joe, over the last few days, so that even a very slight amount of snow is going to stick to the roadways and stick to just about everything. So if I can tell you right now that if I had just a passing flurry or two tomorrow where I am, it may very well whiten my driveway, my blacktop, even though I'm not expecting all that much. So, but again, if you want to use your snow shovels, you're probably going to have to go south of New York City to do that, because most of the lower Hudson Valley will probably get out of this with not much more than a light coating at worst.
We also in the south right now, in the southern part of this storm across the deep south, we've got the severe weather happening. Wind advisories in parts of South Carolina, parts of most of northern Georgia, including me. We have wind advisories in southern Tennessee, a good portion of central and northern Alabama into Mississippi. We have, I believe, two working tornado watches that cover Mississippi down into Louisiana. And this is the whole nine yards here with this particular storm system. And again, it's an east-west type of setup here, which is something we don't see too often. And this is because of the blocking pattern in the North Atlantic. We have a big blocking low that's sitting in Atlantic Canada that is not going to go away anytime in the next 4 or 5 days. So that is impacting, that is going to be the primary weather driver of everything that goes on in the eastern part of the United States on until further notice. On the satellite loop tonight, a well-defined, it's hard to believe, Joe. You look at this satellite, you look at the satellite signature, and everything that's going on between the heavy snow, the comma head that is sitting back across northwest Missouri and northeast Kansas, the obvious line of thunderstorms that runs southward through the deep south and back into southeast Texas, and the northern edge of the clouds actually pushing up into Michigan and into western New York. And you look at this and you think, how is it that we're not going to see this snow move much further north than central New Jersey?
Well, yeah, that's going to be the question. And you pointed this out yesterday, Joe. If you look at the NAM, which provides you with both the area where the snow actually makes it down to the ground, plus the radar signature. When you look at the radar
Well, let me
signature,
bring it. Let me bring that up since you're talking about it. You want the 12 kilometer?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's do that, and I'll just roll it back. So this is the
And this
18Z.
is this is again, this is for all of you snow lovers who will be carefully watching either on television or on your computers the radar tomorrow, and you're going to say, "Oh, look at that! The radar is showing the snow is moving further to the north. Oh, it looks like we're going to get more snow than they had been predicting." But again, that's radar, and that's going to be the virga, or the snow that'll be aloft, that'll be falling through a very dry environment, and likely will be evaporating before it gets a chance to get down to the ground.
And
So
even if it were to get into the ground, look at what happens. This is at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You have this, darker blue that's through much of New Jersey except the northern part. So basically from Route 78 south. It comes in and it's still holding together. And now we're at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you think, okay, well, how can we miss? Well, look at what's happening in the upper right. You see that snow that's back in eastern Nova Scotia and the Bay of Fundy. Well, and then watch how the isobars turn northerly along the east coast from Maine down all the way into North Carolina. That's the low redeveloping to the east pretty rapidly and moving out. And we've been talking about the block and a short wave that's up in southeastern Canada back to Maine. That swings around and that just suppresses all of this, and it goes out, and there it goes. And yeah, just as it's about to maybe snow to a point where the ground is getting whitened tomorrow in those areas that are north of Route 195, northeast Pennsylvania, Long Island, southernmost Connecticut, or the lower Hudson Valley, it just falls apart and disappears, and it's gone.
goodbye.
Yep. And in the meantime, we've got the NAM also showing, as the low moves east across Tennessee and Kentucky, snow breaking out across Virginia, freezing rain on the southern end that expands all the way down to the North Carolina state line. Thunderstorms across the south continue their march tonight through Mississippi and Alabama. Then they start to weaken a bit as they get to Georgia, but a few of them hold together. So I may see some lightning and thunder here during the overnight. And then once that low starts to translate eastward and you start to deal with the remaining upper trough across southern New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, snow might take a little bit of a break or a pause in some places and then fire up again during tomorrow afternoon and evening, and it might lead down an additional inch or two or three before it finally all pulls out sometime a little during the late evening or certainly before midnight.
And I should point out that on the 18Z Foos, this is the tabular version of the NAM. This is the numerical version, the numbers, the raw numbers. At 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the R1 level of the atmosphere at LaGuardia is 67%. The relative humidity is 67%. Now, if you expect to get any kind of precipitation, you're going to need to moisten up that lower level of the atmosphere to at least 80%. It's 67% at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So it could be snowing again high aloft at several thousand feet above you. But if it comes down into that air, it's just going to dry up. Now, by the time we get to 1 p.m. tomorrow, the R1 has moistened up to 94%. So basically what we're saying here is that it's probably not going to be snowing when you wake up tomorrow morning in New York. However, it will be snowing probably, however lightly, at 1 p.m. So sometime between 7 and 1 tomorrow, maybe more likely closer to 11 o'clock or noon tomorrow, is when you're going to see some snow, some light snow, possibly make it down to the ground in the immediate New York City metropolitan area. Again, as Joe has been pointing out, partly a function of the block, but also partly, as I've been pointing out, a function of the dry air that is going to be in place out ahead of this system that's going to eat away or eat up the initial shot of moisture, however light it will be. So that's your problem, folks. Dry air and blocking that is going to be, and all of you who are saying, why can't it ever get nice and cold here so that we can get a chance at getting some, well, you got your wish. It's nice and cold. You got the block, but unfortunately, there's a little bit too much of the block and a little bit too much of the dry air and cold air to set the stage for, at least locally, a big snowfall. Better luck next time, folks.
I'm just going to take a slight issue for the umpteenth time. I guess maybe I should just stop banging my head on the desk, thinking that's going to get rid of my headache. But when people make references to a bust, quote unquote, first of all, um, maybe it's the way I'm taking it. There was no bust, okay, in this forecast. If you're forecasting a dusting to an inch from the get go, and all you get is a dusting to an inch. Somehow that always, now I kind of understand where people are going with this because they're thinking, they look at every storm system, no matter how small or how large, as a potential 3 foot snow producer. And it just never works that way. We knew all week long going in that the block potentially was going to be a problem. So it's not as if um, that's a big surprise. And we also knew that some of the overly aggressive models earlier this week for areas further to the north, or models taking lows up to Cleveland, was utter BS. So, I just don't, I take issue when people say, oh, this storm's a bust. Well, for depending on where you are, if you get what you're being forecasted, it ain't a bust. That's what it is. Okay. So this was my final call, and my early call was a little more aggressive in southern areas of New Jersey and southern Pennsylvania. I kind of backed off to a large degree there, particularly in the middle part. But the dusting to at most an inch that I have in the northern areas is basically to just maybe cover myself just in case. Would not shock me if that area sees very little or nothing. And then you start to get further south in New Jersey, you get closer to 195 and points southward, you're talking about an inch or two. And then in Pennsylvania, when you get south of Route 78 from Allentown, south and west, you start to go into the 2 to 4 range. And then, of course, as you make your way down to Maryland, you're looking at 4 to 6 and into Delaware, and then central and southern Delaware down through the rest of Maryland and into Virginia. I've got a 6 to 8. It could very well wind up being more than that. This was my final call that I put out today. I put out this morning, and it's making its debut here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. So here's what the radar looks like at the moment. We've got precipitation across southern Virginia. Snow, probably a little bit of freezing rain in the mix here too. Looks like some heavier snow bands are moving now into through West Virginia and in southwestern Virginia as well. Uh, some of that's probably moderate snow, might even be some freezing rain and sleet in the mix. Further south in eastern Tennessee and here in North Georgia, it's rained. Had a couple of downpours already go through here at my house in North Georgia just a short time ago. And then to the west of there, in these yellow echoes that run down from southern Kentucky, but particularly through Tennessee, and then you get down into Mississippi and Louisiana, and we're seeing those yellow and red boxes. So we have some severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings going on right now. Further west across Indiana and Illinois, moderate to heavy snow there. Also through central Illinois, back through Missouri. The snows are showing up on the radar a little lighter, but when you look at the observations, when you look at some of the observations that I was looking at the 7 o'clock, there were still quite a few areas of moderate snow that were being reported here. So this is the colder side. Temperatures are down close to 20, even in the upper teens in some places. So we're talking about snow ratios of 15 to 1 or higher. So it doesn't take that much. You could see sometimes what looks like Virga on the radar in a case like this, and it's actually still snowing uh, rather hard on this on the backside. But again, the northern part of this, which is some echoes are just getting very close to Chicago now, is where the sharp cutoff is. And you can see there's some echoes aloft in southwestern Pennsylvania and up into Maryland already. But again, as this moves northward, around midday tomorrow, when that northerly wind starts to kick in with the block to the west, to the east, that's going to bring dry air southward, and you're going to start to see the radar echoes getting eaten away quickly in areas across northeastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, and Long Island. And they'll hang on a little longer, but that dry air may get down pretty far south into New Jersey. So I'm a little bit cautious here about what some of those amounts are. They may still very well in southern New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania be a bit on the high side. The Storm Prediction Center tonight, they had an enhanced risk. They've kind of lowered it now. They've got a slight risk as the storms have played through in eastern Mississippi, eastern and northern Mississippi, down into parts of southeast to southwest Louisiana, marginal risk to just about the Georgia state line. And tomorrow, the risk area shrinks, but there is a marginal risk for isolated severe thunderstorms in southeast Georgia and in northern and even down into the northern portion of central Florida. And after that, for day three, we've got really nothing as far as severe weather is concerned. And from the standpoint of precip, so some of this is front end loaded, but we also are starting to see the precip from the next system that'll be developing in the western Gulf of Mexico around midweek, and that's showing up as inch and a half or more liquid from northern Louisiana and up into central Mississippi down to the Gulf Coast, and actually in a fairly large area across Texas, northern Louisiana, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia. When some of that precip gets in there, it's going to be in the form of snow and then maybe turning over to sleet and freezing rain over time. We also have not as much precip going on in the west. That's really lightened up a bit. And as far as WPC, we can check out. I don't know what I did with the short range map. It's the second time that, oh, here it is. So this is the short range map. This was the last update that they did. So this was at shortly before 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to just put the probability of at least 4 additional inches. In some places it's additional, in some places it's coming. But you can see where the maximum area is. If you want to use the dark blue line is 40 to 50%. So from there south, you've got a pretty good shot for at least 4. It's 80% or higher in southernmost New Jersey, across Delaware, most of just about all of Maryland, and the most of northern and central Virginia. That 40% line gets almost down to Richmond here, so it gets pretty far south and extends back into southeast Ohio. Still at maybe some areas of 4 additional inches between now and when the snows start to come to an end across Missouri and into Illinois. So pretty busy there. And on the long range, so let me back up a day. So this is Friday. Friday, the Storm Prediction Center, I'm sorry, the Weather Prediction Center has a rather large area of 30 to 50% chance for the equivalent of, let's just say, 2 to 3, the liquid equivalent of snow and sleet, a quarter of an inch of liquid equivalent. So roughly 2 to maybe 3 inches in that green area is 30 to 50. And this blue, the blue areas you see there that they've spotted out is 50 to 70. And then for Friday into Saturday, uh, northern Georgia, northern Alabama, northeast Mississippi, that's all 30 to 50. This is the first time that I've been here that I've seen 30 to 50 here. I've seen 10 to 30 before, but now I'm seeing 30 to 50. And there's a small area of 50 to 70 in southwestern North Carolina. And that extends up into Kentucky and into parts of West Virginia. And then for Sunday, the Weather Prediction Center has actually expanded their area. This is a 10 to 30% chance. And, this is on the day 7 of their forecast. So you normally don't see more than 10 to 30 in this. If you see more than 10 to 30 in the day 7 forecast, it's just like when SPC puts something in that day 4 to 8 time frame, it means they're serious about it. Well, we could probably say the same here, where they think something may happen. Northern North Carolina, all the way up the coastal plain into Maine, a 10 to 30% chance. of at least 2.5 to 3 inches of snow. So WPC seems to think that maybe something is going to happen next weekend.
Well, in my Facebook forecast, I did put the chance for some light snow or flurries from late Saturday into early Sunday. Whatever may accumulate in the aftermath of that, still a big question mark. Whether or not we actually get that, still a question mark as well, because again, we're about a week away and things are going to vacillate, things are going to change as to how this, because we're really dealing with, Joe, as we pointed out yesterday, with not one but two systems, an upper level system diving on down from the Great Lakes and another system that is moving across the Gulf Coast out off the southeast coast. If they teleconnect, then it becomes a major storm system which could come right up along the coast and again bring lots and lots of snow. That's what the models have been saying from time to time, but more often than not, they have been saying that they're going to remain separate and that we're going to get maybe some precipitation from actually two separate systems. But again, we'll see. It can't be too specific on things so far in advance, like 5 6 days in advance.
No, no intent, Joe. There's never no intention here of being specific. I'm just going to again point out what's going on in the upper air because the driver is this. This is the big blocking low that's sitting over Newfoundland. If I between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and if I just roll it back to Thursday, the upper low was in eastern Maine. So what did it move? 100 miles tops, maybe a
Right.
little bit more. So that's locked in there, and that's whoops. I mean, that's not what I wanted to do, but there we go. So let me take this off. So now we're looking at. I'm going to go back. We're going to look at a couple of different runs here, so that everybody. I want, if I succeed in one thing about doing this show is that um, I like people to just kind of gain an understanding of what's happening in the upper air in order to get a flavor for the pattern and the pattern trend that you can do if you look in for the long range when you go out a week or 2 weeks. You can certainly get a flavor for what the pattern is going to be. Obviously, beyond the 6 or 7 day time frame, if you want to talk about specifics, even in you really have to be inside 4 days to kind of really start getting, getting a real handle on what's going to happen. But that block just sits there, and now through Saturday, see it's sort of rotating around. You can see the impact of this really vigorous shortwave that it's created this storm in Kansas and Missouri, the low center moving east, and of course because the block is there and it's got another arm swinging around in eastern Canada to Maine and New England, that shortwave, if it had stayed identifiable and as a separate feature, if the block were a little more relaxed, then you could have lifted this up to the northeast. But instead, it gets shoved right underneath. It just goes straight out underneath and gets absorbed by the block, which just continues to spin. Now we're into Wednesday, and you have a short wave here down in the southwest. There's a trough that's running from Lake Superior over into Colorado. There's also another short wave that's running near Great Slave Lake in northwestern Canada, and that's going to be the player here. So you watch these pieces as they move along. That Great Slave Lake trough on this run dives southward, phases with that southern system, and suddenly you have this vigorous, negatively tilted arm. And look at what happens to the block at the end of the week. It finally gets an opening to move away to the northeast. So that allows this system to strengthen. And more importantly, the block moving away gives it room. So it's able to come up the east coast. Now, the block goes out further east. So because of that, it only gets so far north and then gets shoved out to the east. So it's like the upper feature makes it to just southeast of just east of the Delaware coast or southeast of the New Jersey coast is a pretty wrapped up cutoff. And then it's forced to go eastward rather than continue straight northward. So this is a scenario where all the upper features come in and do what they need to do in order to create a major storm in the eastern part of the United States. Now, the other part of this is if we go to the 12Z run, and which was different to an extent. The same players, except this time around, the that shortwave that's coming down from Canada, instead of diving southward, kind of dives more toward the Great Lakes, and the southern system sort of gets left behind. You see that brown streak there? That's kind of a sheared out upper trough in the southern system. So all you're left with is really the northern energy that's by itself. The southern energy goes out underneath. The block doesn't seem to move out nearly as fast. So this would be an indication that when the model, if the block is stronger and takes longer to move out of the way, you're not going to have room for something to come up the East Coast. It'll be off the southeast coast and maybe get up to North Carolina, and then it's going to move out to the east. So that would be, the other way this plays. I guess the third way would be if we go back to the 18Z, is if the block really gets out of the way and this trough goes neutral tilt somewhere near 90, so you wind up taking a low from the Gulf of Mexico that runs up, as a coast hugger. And you wind up changing the rain along the coast. You have snow changing to rain. It buries areas well inland. I haven't seen the model actually do that yet. It would seem to me that that's probably of the three possibilities here, Joe. I think that's probably the one that has the longest of long shots to happen because you really need the blocking low to fly out to the east. That doesn't seem to be the case. So I think it's either going to be, it's either going to be where the block moves out and you've got room for something to happen. Maybe it's something that's strong, maybe it's something that's moderately strong, or you wind up where we go back to what the 12Z run did, which was to keep the system, the short waves basically separate, and you get a storm that goes up to North Carolina and then gets pushed out to the east.
The algorithms that go into some of these computer models, again, as I mentioned time and time again, beyond 3 days, the computer models are guessing, if you will, doing their best educated guess as to how a system entering the western half of North America from the Pacific Ocean, where there's so few data sets to work on, are trying to determine what's going to happen several days later when it reaches the mid and eastern part of the continent. And sometimes it, churns up a big storm. Sometimes it doesn't. It really won't be until, well, let's see, we're talking about a system for late Saturday, so Friday, Thursday, so probably by Wednesday, we'll be able to start talking with surety or certainty as to what is going to happen next weekend. But until then, we're just going to have to watch. Each day, it's going to be a different scenario or different possibility, not just, with each primary run, 0 and 12Z, but also with the intermediate runs as well. You may have one run say, oh, it's going to be a massive storm next weekend, and then 6 hours later, you have a scenario where all of a sudden it takes it all away. Again, depending upon where each run positions the block and where each run brings the storm in from the southwest or central United States and moves it east and interacts with that potential block. It's going to be that kind of a story. It certainly is going to make it interesting. It's more interesting this winter than we've had in most winters in the last 2 or 3 years. So that should make at least some of you happy that there's something to talk about. But we'll see. Somebody asked Joe on the chat board maybe about 10 minutes ago about the ratio, the snow ratios in southeast Pennsylvania. And the thing is that the ratios aren't going to be all that high. I mean, the temperatures in southeastern Pennsylvania and South Jersey are going to be during this event around 27, 28 degrees. So the snow to rain ratio, or the snow liquid ratio, is going to be something like 11 or maybe 12 to 1. It's not going to be one of those dynamic or dramatic scenarios where a little bit of moisture gives you a lot of puffy, fluffy snow. And it should also be pointed out that this week, although you may see on your local newscasts, when they have their conversation with their local uh, on-camera weather personality. I notice I'm not saying meteorologist because some are not really meteorologists, but just are simply there to, you know, make things look nice. But they'll say, "Boy, it's cold out there, isn't it? Boy, I tell you, it's. I'm glad I'm in here and not outside." But you know what? In terms of temperatures, it's not going to be overly cold. I mean, it's going to be either seasonably cold or a little bit unseasonably cold this week. Mid 20s, upper 20s, near 30. That's not horribly cold. You want horribly cold or terribly cold? Talk about what we had a couple of weeks ago when temperatures were struggling to make it much above 10. That's cold, but it's not overly. But the thing that's going to make it feel like it's terribly cold is that wind. I cannot stress enough. Tomorrow during the storm or non-storm, depending upon where you are, there really isn't going to be all that much in terms of wind. But by later tomorrow, as that storm gets its act together and starts revving up off the mid-Atlantic coast and intensifying, we're going to get into the backlash of gusty north and north-northwesterly winds. And that wind, once it starts revving up late tomorrow and tomorrow night, is going to stay revved up right on through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And the fact is that with those winds gusting at times to over 20, 30, maybe even approaching 40 miles an hour, you've got that, and you've got the temperatures that are going to be very, very not overly cold, but cold enough. Create wind chills probably in the teens through much of this week during the day. So that's what we're facing this week. It's going to be cold. It's going to be blustery, and again, we've got that storm tomorrow, and we've got another one possibly heading our way for later on in the weekend, next weekend, and we'll see how this all uh, comes out. And shambles.
Yes,
Hey,
and shambles. This is out for Saturday morning as I was actually impressed by this as a relatively sharp looking trough there from Michigan down to the Gulf Coast. The blocking low is right at 50 and 50, which is where you want it. And the surface from this, which I'll bring you close up, I was a little shocked by this actually because I didn't expect it, but because the earlier run really didn't show much of anything on the ensemble member plots, but it actually picks it up here. Look, it's got it's got a lot of the members here are showing a low off the South Carolina coast and deepens it off the North Carolina Virginia coast. So when you look at some of these pressures here, a number of centers near the coast are in the mid 80s to near 985, 990 ish. And the ones that are inside the mean low pressure center, which is out at about 36.7 and 71 and almost 72 west, are in the 970s. So, for 156 hours out for the ensembles to show something that deep is unusual. And it's almost always going to be east of where the operational is. Usually, every once in a while, it'll be west of the operational, but a lot of times with these coastal events, it starts off with the position being east of the operationals. But if you're thinking about next weekend, you should be. If you think about it this weekend and you're a snow lover, this is something that certainly supports the idea of an important storm developing. But again, I go back to what I said earlier. It's all about the block and how it handles how it behaves this coming week, particularly the latter part of this week, is going to be the most important with respect to what may happen next weekend. And another thing I just want to go to is I want to just go back down to the south uh, because in the deep south it you it's not like up in the mid Atlantic and in other places in the sense that you're going to see 1 foot plus snow amounts. I mean that happens every 15 or 20 years. You get something like that. Um, but I'm going to bring up this is the GFS. Let's go with the winter weather. So I want to do freezing rain. I need to get. You know what? in April, when I get my eyes checked again, I am going to definitely get new glasses because I think my eyesight's weakened a bit in the last year. But you can see what it shows here on the regional. I mean, we're talking about some serious ice accretion here. An inch and a quarter of freezing rain, potential ice accretion in parts of northern Louisiana on the run today. Across North Georgia, we're looking at a half to three quarters of an inch. The same in much of western North Carolina. Just going to go up a little further north from the perspective of Virginia, so you can take a look at this for you folks in the deep south that are watching, and also maybe the southern mid-Atlantic states. We're looking at potential here for some freezing rain late this week if this Gulf low really gets going. So some of what you see in Indiana and Ohio is right now, and some of what you see in Virginia is right now. But the stuff you saw in North Carolina was and points south
We're not.
was. I know the maps aren't up
You're
there.
planning.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry about that. Uh,
I thought so. I thought a lot of the people. So somebody just said, "Please don't do that, Joe." With the when we hit 200, and I mean, who's the guy who's been saying all along that we should be using an air horn?
an air horn.
200. No one. No, you can't please everybody around here. But we're up to 207 likes.
I mean,
Thank you so much for that.
you could see all the freezing rain that's being shown here. Actually, I'm a little confused with how this model is picking. It seems like I'm having trouble picking up all of the data for the right. There we go. Finally, it's at the right time frame. So you can see the freezing rain that is showing up in Georgia, Tennessee, South and North Carolina. Again, what you see in the Ohio Valley is probably what's going on now. And for snow, let me put the 10-to-1 snow ratio map. Because down here, when it snows, everybody celebrates. They just are obsessed with it. Okay, so there's a lot of mixed up stuff here because obviously what you got up here in West Virginia and Virginia is what's going on right now. But and I know probably shouldn't. The snow amounts down here are not anything crazy. Either a half an inch to an inch. Uh, I'm gonna maybe move to a bigger time frame here. There we go, better time frame. So maybe about 1 to 3 inches here in northern Georgia, and a bit more as you get into Alabama and Mississippi. So a lot to look ahead to, Joe, here this week. I think it's going to be a very interesting week with everything that's happening, and I'm sure we're going to be struggling for the next few days. But I agree with you. Wednesday's probably the day. If you start to see the models settling on things by Wednesday, we should have a fairly good idea of whether we're going to be dealing with something important for next weekend.
Yes. Again, we'll be within about 3.5 days of the event, and that should be able to tell us what will give us a hint as to what we may be seeing for next weekend, whether it looks like a potential major system or whether or not it's going to be something where we're going to be, well, for the snow lovers, going to be disappointed again. We'll see. Interesting about Ocean County. I remember when I was on radio, I did the weather for many, many years on WOBM radio in Toms River. And so we had to cover Ocean County. And Ocean County is an interesting county in New Jersey. It runs all the way from Point Pleasant in the north. It's kind of like I used to refer, when I used to do the weather in the morning with Steve Paul, that was the morning guy on WOBM. I sometimes referred to Ocean County as the Chile of New Jersey. You know how Chile is a long, skinny county, long, skinny country, I should say.
Oh, Chile. In
Chile.
Santiago, Chile. Da,
Yeah,
da, da. In Santiago, Chile. Yes.
yeah. But you can go all the way south along the Jersey Shore down to Osborne Island, Mystic Island, Beach Haven, and that's considerably to the far to the south as opposed to, let's say, up in Point Pleasant. So for a storm like this, Joe, and I'm just giving an example here, for this kind of a storm, when you're doing it for Ocean County alone, you could go with a range of anywhere from 2 inches in the north to 8 or 9 inches in the south. I mean, a very wide range going from north to south for Ocean County. And may I also point out one other thing, and that is that there's no rain and no sleet. I was throwing a fit tonight, and Renato will back me up on this. We were eating dinner and watching one of the local newscasts. I will not mention which channel we were watching, but there was a local newscast. They start off the top of the news with the news anchor saying, and a winter storm may be affecting us. Will we see rain? Will we get sleet? Or maybe we might even see snow. And I almost wanted to throw the glass at the screen because I said, what rain? What sleet? It's snow. It's all snow. There's no ands, if, or buts on that. And when he came back later in the newscast, the same news anchor doing the tease for the upcoming weathercast, which would come after the commercial, said, well, in just a moment, so and so will be here to tell us whether or not we're going to be in for some rain or sleet or snow. And I'm saying, this guy is nuts. What is he? He's just, is he flicking through his mental file and picking out what he normally would say in a typical situation, or what most news
25-year-old wrote the tease.
you know say it.
That's all. It's
It's
a
gonna be
25-year-old wrote the tease.
yeah, probably
No,
that's. But
that's it.
I tell you what, if I was the guy who was doing the weather, and again, I'm not going to mention the TV station, but if I was the meteorologist doing the weather and I had this guy leading into my forecasts and or promoting my forecast with this kind of stuff, I would be all over him after the newscast, saying, don't talk to me before you do the weather or do the news. Talk to me before you write your script or your lead into me, because we're not going to get rain. We're not going to get sleet. It's not one of your, it's snow, for goodness sake. And I got very upset by that.
I
So,
know. We've all been down that particular
no, it
road.
was not Frank Scalera. It was not Lonnie Quinn. It was not Lonnie Quinn. Lonnie has been on vacation for the past couple of weeks anyway.
But even
No,
when Lonnie's on vacation, he lurks in the background here on the Joe
yeah,
and Joe Weather Show podcast, Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And he may have even been lurking Friday and Saturday when we were on the last 2 days. I just want to acknowledge David Fuller, Brandon Doherty, and William Uber all hitting the super chat tip jar tonight. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. And let's finish off tonight with a little Briller Jeopardy. Since we've already gone an hour, another couple of minutes is not going to kill us. But let's not push it, okay? Because
right.
I'm getting sleepy. Um, Scott sent it to me. I just got to find it.
I was
You
going
know,
to
I
ask you,
find on Messenger sometimes that it loses it loses stuff, and you have to.
and I was going to ask you, about this week. Okay, I was asking, maybe we might, since not much is going to be happening except for cold and wind on Tuesday and for several days thereafter. Maybe we could take Tuesday off.
Oh, I think that's a possibility. We could do that.
I'm only
I'll
saying
run
that
it.
because that's the day that Renan and I are watching our grandson, who is now just over 11 months old, and he's become a real handful. And
Okay,
after he leaves, after we've watched him for 8 or 9 hours,
you're
the two of
exhausted.
us, the two of us are just like, ugh.
I know you're exhausted. I get it. Well, either that or I'll solo on Tuesday. If it's worth soloing, I'll solo on Tuesday. But we'll figure it out. Yeah, you could take you. Yeah, I'm sure the network bosses will not object. You know, Uh, they uh, they tend to be touchy sometimes, Joe, but I can handle them.
Yeah.
All right, on Briller Jeopardy tonight. Average annual snowfall for the following five cities. Are you ready, chat board? Detroit goes first today. Average annual snowfall for Detroit.
How about 60 inches?
That's more than just a little too high.
Maybe
And
I was thinking
David
about Ann
Scott at
Arbor
30,
probably.
you're way too low. All right, so we're getting closer with John Sachs 77 and Maggie P at 42. Frank R, ring the bell for Frank R 45. 45.
Congratulations, Frank R.
Okay, Kansas City. Speaking of Kansas City, which we did at the top of the show, Kansas City. Miss Fowler, you should hit this one on the nose with Kansas City.
I'm staying silent here for the moment.
Um, a lot of you are too high. I will tell you that. Oh, Rich Rothmansky, I knew you would get this. 18, 18. And by the way, Rich is going to be on with us on Thursday here on the
Wow,
Joe and Joe Weather Show.
that'll be great. Yeah.
Yes. 18. Yeah, you might have thought that maybe Kansas City, that number would be higher, but it's 18. And Brandon Grablichoff, 18.2 to be technical. Minneapolis for the annual snowfall, Joe. Minneapolis.
Before we get into that, I have Mrs. Hutch 53. Um, that is a cousin. That's Renata's cousin,
Oh,
Maria's Hutchinson, and she lives in Rush, Kentucky. And she says, "Hey, Joe and Joe, Herta, that's Renata's aunt, and Maria, her cousin, from Rush, Kentucky. We have over 3 inches now, still snowing. And thanks for giving us such great information. Thank you, Maria."
oh, you're quite well. Yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
Minneapolis. Well, we already have a few people that hit it on the nose. Justice C. William Uber, and I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Justice C. William Uber, Frank Scolari, you're very, very close. 51, 51 for the season for Minneapolis. New York City, New York
Well,
City.
New York City has vacillated, as you are well aware, in recent years, back and forth. I think right now, New York City is 31. Or
Snake
am I in
Country.
state country?
Chuck Cardillo at 29. Snake Country. Adam Lowe at 30. 30.
There you
And
go.
and of course, Rich Rothmansky is going to get that right. Maggie P. At 30 as well. And Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City.
I would think Oklahoma City will probably be on a single digit side. I'll say 9.
Yeah, that's close. It's a little high, but it's close. Leon of Lindenhurst at the doorstep at 8, but Owen D 23, 7, 7, and Maggie P and a bunch of others, all 7. And the bonus tonight is Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, I would think, would be a little bit higher, if for nothing else. I think they're in an elevated area that should help get them. So I'll say 13.
No, you know what? I would have thought Nashville would have been higher, but actually, the chat board's flying tonight. Conroy Jet at 5 is correct for Nashville. Just 5. 5
Only
measly
5.
inches. Yeah, I would have thought it would have been higher than that, but it's actually 5. Now, I wonder
Hmm.
if it's one of those places where it's like the downtown is 5, but the surrounding areas are higher. I'm sure that is the case. But as far as, or that's the airport, but 5 is the number. So there you have it, folks. We've gotten through another round of the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Don't forget, by the way, if you miss us, you can always go back and watch us. It's in my YouTube library on my YouTube channel. I think it's at Joe Chaffee Weather on YouTube. Also, if you're on Spotify or you have Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music or YouTube Music, the Joe and Joe Weather Show is available there as well as in other places that call podcasts home. So you can always find us. We're everywhere, and we darn well should be everywhere. Okay, so we'll see everybody tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. 230 likes, Joe. That's a lot,
232
and
on my counter here. That's pretty
22,
good.
almost 2,200 views so far. Because I know a lot of folks watch the show, you know, after the live's done. They watch it overnight and during the day tomorrow. So we will see you tomorrow. 99, everybody.
99, folks. And for those of you in the storm zone, stay safe.